Hi, thanks for joining us tonight on Tea Time. I'm Ray Rinaldi. I'll be your host, and Tea Time is brought to you by New Jersey Tea Party Coalition. Tonight, we have our guest is Dave Coursey. And Dave Coursey, he was a former candidate for the United States Congress in the 12th District, and he is the Executive Director of New Jersey Fair Tax Speakers Bureau. So we're going to be talking about the fair tax tonight. And it's very, very interesting. And so I want to welcome you, Dave. Thanks for coming. I know the way the current system is, the income tax code, and how many pages is the current income tax?
65,000 plus pages, and every day it grows because every day there's a tax court ruling, which adds to the tax code.
Wow, 65. Now, do you know anyone who's ever read that?
No, I don't think a person who has ever lived has ever read it, and certainly nobody truly understands it, because there is no way to legally do your taxes and not have a contradiction within them.
Wow. So tell us, I know there's the fair tax and the flat tax, and tonight we're going to talk about the fair tax. So you also, I would like to give a little bit more of your bio here. You were formerly hosted the talk radio program Let's Talk Real Estate.
Yes.
And The Lowdown. Yes. You're a Bayshore Tea Party Community Outreach Director, and you live in Oceanport with your wife and 3 children.
Yes.
Okay. So what got you onto the fair tax?
Well, originally I started as a proponent for the flat tax, which is a tax that is based at a flat rate and based on income.
Right.
And then I started learning about a new idea back 15, 20 years ago called the fair tax, which would be a flat tax, but instead of being based on income, it's based on consumption, in effect, the national sales tax. And at first I thought, well, I don't know, that doesn't sound right. And the more and more I learned about it, I realized actually it's a much better system, much fairer, and a much better idea. And the beauty of it is, everyone, there would be no special interest, everyone involved would be paying the tax. Over 300 million people, illegal aliens, tourists, criminals. Of course, criminals even go to stores and buy things sometimes. Mm-hmm. So the fair tax would be a national sales tax on all new goods and services.
So it would just be flat right across the board?
Right. No special favor. The only thing that would be exempted is educational expenses.
Okay.
The way the bill is written.
Okay. So, so that would really do away with filing a return.
Yeah, you would no longer would the American citizens or taxpayers have to file a tax return. No more fear of an IRS audit. You go to a store, you buy a product, you pay the tax there and then, you're done. You go home, no more worrying about April 15th. Okay,
so now the corporations, they would still, how would that work?
Corporations will not pay tax under the fair tax as well. The fair tax, the consumption tax based on the fair tax will do away with payroll taxes, which is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, your income taxes, your corporate taxes, and your inheritance taxes, along with a whole host of other taxes. But those are the main ones. You're replacing them with one simple tax paid when you go to the register and you're done.
Okay, so the corporations don't pay any taxes.
Right, which they don't do now, by the way. A lot of people say, well, the corporations, of course they pay. No, they don't. They really, all they do is collect the money from you when you buy their product. They have it factored into their price. So one way or another, it comes down to the taxpayer, individual taxpayer paying that tax. What we're saying with the fair tax is, why don't we cut out the charade and just put the tax on the back end where everybody's paying it anyhow, let everybody know that, and we're done. It'll kill off all the special interest groups, the lobbyist groups, and get a lot more control for the American people down in Washington.
So do you think, in other words, the cost of product will come down?
Yes, it will, because when I mentioned the corporate tax, a lot of what we buy has what we call embedded taxes in it. Mm-hmm. A few years back, Harvard did a study and said the average embedded taxes within a product we buy is 22%.
Wow.
And if you think about it, it's true, because if you buy a loaf of bread at the store, you find out the farmer had to buy seed. There had to be a seed company that was paying taxes, was paying FICA for their employees, paying income taxes for their employees. Then the drivers of the truck, the gasoline used to deliver the bread, the plastic the bread is wrapped in. the bakers, everyone involved, there's taxes along the way.
Okay.
So once that's all factored in, they came up with the study and said 22% of what we buy has embedded taxes. Under the fair tax, you would basically be getting rid of most of those embedded taxes.
So you would lower the cost of the
So
product,
ultimately, the cost of the product would be lower.
so then you would just pay the 23% on whatever consumption, whatever
Well,
you
the
would
fair
buy.
tax rate would be 23%.
Right.
Now,
And how do they come up with that?
okay, to make the tax revenue neutral, it is not designed to lower taxes, et cetera. It's designed to bring in the same amount of money that the current tax code is bringing in.
Okay,
And to do that, the rate would be 23%.
okay, and that would cover all our
Social Security, Medicare, and by the way, it would make Social Security and Medicare much safer and on more stable ground, because right now, if a person makes over $105,000, what happens to his payroll taxes? They're cut off. You don't pay any more Social Security or Medicare after those limits. Under the fair tax, every time you go to the store and buy something, a certain portion of that money is allocated to Social Security and Medicare. So with everybody buying things, there is no limit. So it would be much safer to set up Social Security and Medicare on that.
So everybody would have a hand in the pie. Everybody would be
Everybody
contributing.
pays.
From and that's another thing now. The poor, the people that really are struggling.
Yes.
They would also have to pay that's
Yes, they
the
would.
23%.
They would. They would be paying the tax as with everybody else. There is no means testing. But the beauty of the fair tax,
Right.
it has a component called the prebate.
Okay.
What that means is we recognize that everyone has basic necessities that must be covered. And since there are no exemptions for what you buy,
Right.
the government puts out a study, well, not a study, but puts out every year a chart showing how much the average American or average American family has to spend on the, quote, necessities to meet a subsistence level, to be right at the basic poverty level.
Okay.
So for instance, a family of four, it is estimated approximately $26,000 they must spend on the necessities every year. So you take 23% of $26,000, it comes to approximately $6,000 for the year. 6,000 divided by 12 comes to $500 a month. So that family of four would receive a check at the beginning of the month for $500 to cover the taxes on their necessities. Everyone would get it, whether it's Warren Buffett or an individual at the poverty level. So therefore, the poor actually would benefit under the fair tax.
So that would now. I guess what I'm asking you is that could change. That rate could change.
The fair tax rate.
Yes.
Absolutely. If we keep spending the way we're doing, ultimately Congress would look to raise it.
So we still have to cut our spending.
Oh, absolutely. The fair tax has nothing. It's not a mechanism to lower spending, et cetera. But what it will do is make Congress have to be more honest. They can't keep hiding things. So that would put public pressure on them to start getting control, because they have absolutely no fiscal control.
Right, right. So we'd still have to watch what they're doing.
Absolutely. That's a never-ending battle till we hit the grave.
Yeah, yeah. Now, the other thing is, I've heard about the VAT tax.
Yes.
Now, how is that different
Okay.
than the fair tax?
A lot of opponents try to claim the VAT tax is the fair tax. That is absolutely false. The
Okay.
VAT tax is nothing like the fair tax. The fair tax is a tax on the back end. When you buy something, if you paid $100 for it, you will clearly see that the price of the product was $77.23 you paid for the fair tax. A VAT tax is a tax that's put on at each level of production. So if you're making that bread again, the seed manufacturer may have to pay a 10% tax. So he'll add that to the bill to the farmer. Everybody along the line would be adding the tax in on their end. So at the end, the $2 loaf of bread you bought at the store last week will now suddenly cost $3. The reason politicians love the VAT tax is because it's a hidden tax. So they feel that the American people would turn around and blame the supermarket owner for being greedy. When the reality is the supermarket owner wasn't making any more money on that loaf of bread. when the price was lower. The government is the one getting that extra dollar, but the average American wouldn't see that, so they will not blame the politician. That's why you'll hear Barack Obama or a lot of people in Congress talk about a VAT tax, because they don't want to take the blame and let everybody know how fiscally irresponsible they are.
Right, so that $100 that you're buying something for $100,
Yes.
that has the 23% in it.
Well, it depends. I'm just giving that as an
Right,
example.
well, that example. So
Right. But the embedded taxes will be coming out. So if a product
Right.
originally cost $100, embedded taxes, we said, are 22%. In theory, $22 will come out. In reality, I doubt very much the whole 22 would come out, because a certain part of it would be the FICA
Right.
that your employer pays for you as a matching contribution currently.
Right.
So you may say, well, gee, actually, that's part of my salary. I should get that money. And your employer may say, that's true. So actually, you'd be getting a pay raise via the fair tax. And the other beauty of the fair tax is that means you're getting 100% of your paycheck less your state tax. Currently, someone in New Jersey who makes $1,000 a week and will put them at the low 15% tax rate, which is the lowest,
Right.
they would probably net between $675 and $700 a week is what they would net out of that $1,000 paycheck.
Right.
$70 of that would be state taxes.
Okay.
Under the fair tax, your $1,000 check, the only thing deducted will be the $70 from the state. So that means your paycheck would be $930. Would you rather have $675 or $930?
Yeah.
And then you decide what taxes you pay by your choices when you go buy something.
Okay.
Gives freedom back to the people, not to a
Empower.
bunch of bureaucrats and politicians.
So how many people more would be paying into the system with this fair
Everyone,
tax?
300 million
Like
plus.
how many pay now? Like
Right now, currently, there's approximately 120 million tax-paying entities in the U.S.
Okay.
Under the fair tax, 300 million plus. Tourists come here for a visit, they go in a store and buy a Coke, they're paying the tax.
Yeah, well, that's
And
certainly...
think about all the illegal, think about drug dealers. Even drug dealers go and buy a fur coat for their girlfriend or something, guess what? They go in a store and buy it, they're paying the tax. Right now, they're paying nothing. It's a way for us to get back.
All right. Well, there's a lot of questions that I have, and I'm sure people will have. So when we come back, I'd like to go over a few things as far as how it affects the education, how it would affect our economy overall, and how it's going to be collected. So there's a lot of different things that we need to know. So we'll be back in a little bit, and we'll talk further on the fair tax. So stay tuned and join us.
With all the excitement happening with the Tea Party, it may be a little hard to separate fact from fiction. Find out the truth for yourself. Visit the New Jersey Tea Party Coalition's website at www.njteapartycoalition.org. You may find a common voice to your concerns on how our government is functioning, and discover a means to help restore our nation based on the proven principles of our Constitution.
Even though you don't want to. Hi, and welcome back to Tea Time. We're here with our guest, Dave Corsi, and he is the Executive Director of the New Jersey Fair Tax Speakers Bureau. Dave, we were talking about the fair tax, and before we get started, is there a website that people can go to so they can learn a little bit more about this?
Absolutely. The website for the fair tax is www.fairtax.org. There's a wealth of information and answers a lot of questions.
Yeah,
about the
I
fair
went on
tax.
it, and it's quite informative. So www.fairtax.com.
No,
Okay.
dot org. Dot org.
Okay,
Dot org.
I'm sorry. Okay. Now, I have a question for you. As far as the fair tax Okay, it eliminates all payroll taxes, all the
Embedded
taxes.
takes out embedded tax.
All the embedded taxes. So the corporations don't have to pay payroll taxes anymore,
Correct.
So how do we know that they won't keep that money and not give it to the employer?
Good question. That's a question always comes up. A lot of people say, well, how do we know that they will not then take the money and keep it
Exactly.
for themselves? Very simple, Jackie Robinson.
Okay, you're going to have to explain that.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Jackie Robinson, as we all know, was the first player in the 20th century to break the color barrier in baseball.
Okay.
And that was a great example of how the free market worked, because all the political establishments, what have you, kept black ball players from being allowed into the major leagues. But by the free market, Branch Rickey of the Brooklyn Dodgers decided he was going to bring in black ball players. So he did it. Now his competition, all the other owners had a decision to make. Were they going to allow Branch Rickey to take all the very best black ball players out of the Negro leagues, put them on the Brooklyn Dodgers, and between them and all the great white ball players they had, win the pennant and World Series every year? Of course they couldn't. Competition, free market forced them all to start opening the doors and bringing in the black ball players where they deserve to be up in the major leagues.
Wow.
That will happen under competition now. If one company says, well, I'll keep all the money, his competitor is going to say, wait a minute, I could be like Walmart. I can increase my market share. I'll make less profit per item, but because of my increase in market share, we'll actually make more money. That forces everybody to bring the prices down to where they should be.
And now that would also, I guess, affect jobs.
Oh, absolutely. The fair tax would be the greatest job creator in this country. If President Obama's listening and he's real serious about increasing jobs, the fair tax is the answer. Think about it. Right now, the United States corporate tax rate of 35% is the second highest among industrial nations. Under the fair tax, you're doing away with that 35% tax. So if you were going to open a new business, a company, a factory, what have you, are you going to place it overseas where you have to worry about rules, restrictions, customs, or bring it back to the good old US of A where there will be no tax?
You just have to fight the EPA.
Yes, but most people, the reason, here's the thing most people don't understand. Most companies do not go overseas because of the so-called high wages, etc. They go because of the tax code. Halliburton left the United States and openly admitted because of the tax code. Here's another thing. U.S.-based companies hold $11 trillion overseas because they don't want to pay that 35% tax rate. An aside, General Motors was profitable every year, except, well, what I should say is internationally. But they were losing money in the U.S., but they weren't going to bring their excess money from overseas here and pay a 35% tax rate. So we ended up bailing them out because of our tax code. Under the fair tax, that money would have been here to begin with, and there would have been no worry about a bailout.
Plus, more people would probably start up businesses
Oh, absolutely.
because they would be able to save more of their money.
Right. In testimony to Congress, when Alan Greenspan was the head of the Fed, he was asked about the fair tax and the $11 trillion overseas. They asked him if fair tax was implemented, would that money come back here? He said at least 90% of it would be brought to our shores. Then he was asked, well, how long would that take about? How many years? And he said, we're not talking years, we're talking a matter of months. Because the United States still is the safest haven for people's assets. So what corporation would prefer to keep it overseas at risk when they could bring it back here and not pay the tax? And ultimately, again, that is a double tax because they are only collecting the money from you to buy when you buy a product
Right,
and holding it
right.
from the tax authority. So ultimately, suffice it to say, people pay all the taxes.
Wow. So now, on the other, how would seniors benefit also?
Seniors would benefit. A lot of seniors are in a situation now where they're into the saving mode.
Right.
They don't, they're generally better on their budgeting anyhow from a lifetime of experience. And again, the beauty of the fair tax is if you are a frugal person and if you control your spending, you will save money because you will not be forced through the tax code to pay an involuntary tax. If I want to buy a product, I will pay the tax. If I choose to keep not and to put the money into savings, my savings will not be taxed, which leads to innovation and leads to a higher savings rate in the United States, which means that we would have much solid creditor ratings. It would be a win-win all the way around.
So, in other words, say you have a 401k, or so you take that money out. Right now, you're taxed on that.
Yes, if you take it out prior to when you're
Right.
Sure.
Okay. Would this flat tax? How would that affect
The
that?
fair tax.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The fair tax. How would that?
It wouldn't affect you at all unless you went out and took the money out of a 401k and went out and bought a brand new
So, in
car.
other words-
Then you would pay the tax. Otherwise, you might move it into your savings account and no tax.
So, in other words, right now, you have your salary. You get money. Okay.
Right.
You put it in a 401k. You're not taxed on it.
Right.
Okay, but you take it out now and you're taxed on it.
Right.
Whereas with the fair tax, you would just take it out and you wouldn't pay any taxes on it.
Correct.
So that's pretty good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I also want to know if people want to go and find out a little bit more about it. I know they can go to the website, but there's some books that have been written also, right?
Yes, there were 3 main books written on the fair tax.
Okay.
The first one was put out by Congressman John Linder from Georgia,
Okay.
who was the primary sponsor of the fair tax bill, which is H.R. 25 in the House of Representatives. He
Right.
wrote it with the radio host Neil Borks.
Okay.
They followed that up a few years later with a book called Fair Tax: The Truth, which was answering criticism from people about the fair tax plan. A lot of people put out a lot of misinformation about the fair tax. What we find is the more and more people learn about the fair tax, the more and more they like it. Because initially it is hard to understand because you think, I'm so used to income tax. Now we're talking a whole new paradigm of how the taxing would be done.
Right, right.
So a lot of people will put out false information, of which many members of Congress are the biggest perpetrators of that, because again, they live off their special interests.
Right, right.
So the fair tax in effect would be doing away with a lot of those special interests. And quite frankly, a lot of members of Congress like the system just the way it is, because now they can control you. Under the fair tax, they would lose a lot of that control. And then finally, Ken Hoagland, who was one of the former heads of the fairtax.org, put out his own book too, called The Fair Tax Solution. All 3 of those books give you an excellent overview of the fair tax.
Okay, plus the website.
Plus the website.
Okay. So we encourage you, if you're interested in learning more about this, to seek some more information, read the books, go to the website. I tell you, it's fascinating. There's just so many questions. I don't even know where to start. As far as education now, will they tax education? I mean,
No,
how does that work?
education is the one thing that is exempted, where an expense for education, for instance, college tuition, they would not be adding the fair tax amount in. But college educations will still go down, because remember, those entities will not be paying all those embedded taxes. So now the universities are going to have to learn to be free market like every other company in America and compete for students, which will bring the prices down.
Now, how does this, or does it involve the health care? How does
It involves healthcare, again, on any new product or service.
Right.
There will be a tax paid. But for instance, it would be the same as if we really were serious about health care. We'd get the government out of it and make health care between you and your doctor. I believe everybody should have an individual account, not tied to your company, but to you. And what is insurance meant to be? Catastrophic. It's not meant for every little nick and bruise. So if we brought insurance back to what it's supposed to be, and everybody paid directly through their account to their doctor, instead of going through all this third party, prices when you go to your doctor would go down. Now, again, insurance is meant for catastrophic, so if God forbid somebody has a serious problem, hospitalization, surgery, etc., that is what should be covered by the insurance.
Right, and you should have that option as well.
Absolutely. The freedom of you to choose, not for the government to decide what's right for you.
Right, and to cross state lines to be able to find the
Purchase
best
insurance?
purchase.
Absolutely. By the way, New Jersey is one of only 2 states that do not allow you to go out of state. We are what is known as a captive state.
Right, right.
And unfortunately, that's one thing we keep working on too, trying to get them to allow us to go out of state.
Right.
When I talk to people about insurance, I mention to them, the town you live in, if every house had a fire that year, would you be able to afford your insurance premium? No, right? There's no way.
Right.
Yet we think we can make insurance affordable by having everybody have insurance claims every year.
Wow.
It cannot be done. It's mathematically impossible. We keep making believe because some politicians like to bamboozle us that it can be done. It can't be. Insurance should go back to what it is. God forbid a child or someone gets cancer, they should have coverage, which is what the catastrophic would do.
Well, this is, I tell you, it's very interesting, and there's a lot of, I mean, as simple as it is, there's a lot of questions.
Absolutely.
Because we're so, like you say, we're so used to the way it is now that it just seems almost too simple sometimes.
Absolutely.
You know
It's a whole
what I mean?
new paradigm,
Right.
and politicians, again, are deathly afraid of it because they are petrified of losing control
Right.
over telling us what to do.
And this would also lessen the lobbyist, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, because the
Right.
number one reason that there are lobbyists is to lobby Congress over something to do with the tax code. So now if they
Right.
can't get special favors for the people who hire
What they
them,
want.
then there's no need for lobbyists.
Right. But the bottom line is that 23%, if we don't watch the spending and watch what, our elected officials are doing, then that can always go up.
Absolutely.
So we really still have to be diligent, even though it's a different system.
Right. This is just
Right.
one half of the component. The other half we have to do is be diligent about spending and get that under control as well.
Right. So we really have to hold their feet to the fire still.
Absolutely.
And even if we do get a new tax system, we have to, because not Social Security, but the income tax started out very, very, very low.
And
So,
that's a great reason why we have to be diligent. We saw what they did with the income tax.
right.
And unfortunately, that is hampering this country more than anything else. And when I do public speaking on it, I try to explain to people,
Right.
if we don't change the tax code of this country, we are doomed.
Right.
All the other problems we have don't mean anything if we cannot get control of our tax code.
Right.
Because
So the
ultimately,
bottom-
that will destroy us.
So the bottom line is we have to remain diligent, we have to educate ourselves, we have to be involved, and I want to thank you so much.
Thank you.
You were a wealth of information, Dave, and it was a pleasure having you, and hopefully you'll come back.
Love to.
And thank you for watching, and we hope that you will come back next time, and in the meantime, look up our website, is the Tea Party Coalition.